Call the meeting order. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please, Bruce.
Councilmember Barrett.
Present.
Councilmember Cavatayo.
Present.
Councilmember Decknack.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hiller.
Present.
Mr. Pajewski.
Present.
Councilmember Schroeder is not here. Councilmember Siegel.
Present. Okay, I'd like a motion to excuse Councilmember Schroeder. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right, regarding the agenda, do we have any changes? Steve?
Mayor, I gave council another packet on a bid that we received from Hutch Paving. I'm just gonna add that to A and just make it A1. We'll just add to that, if that's all right.
Yeah, so the next item is the approval of the minutes from the September 17th meeting. Please review pages 3 to 7, and if okay, I need a motion to approve those minutes. So moved. Second. Any further discussion? Not all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, okay, there. Okay, on pages 8 through 12, we have different board minutes and commission minutes. We're accepting in the public domain. Need a motion to accept.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Next item is a public hearing on 50 Oxford. I need a roll call vote to go into a ZBA meeting to discuss this public hearing.
And to go in a public hearing, Councilmember Barrett.
Yes.
Councilmember Cavatayo.
Present.
Councilmember Decknack.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Giller.
Yes.
Mr. Pajewski.
Yes.
Councilmember Schroeder.
Yes.
Councilmember Siegel.
Is Mary here, Steve?
She's not, and I don't see how to handle it for her. So before you is a zoning variance request for special land use form, which is required when you put in a sports court. In this particular case, what had happened was the resident was, we're not clear if they were unaware that they were required to, or if it was a lack of the contractor pulling the permit. So this permit was not pulled at the time of the installation of the court, of the sports court. And so what happened when we found out about the sports court, we did, of course, have them fill out all the proper permitting forms, go to the board for approval of the court. We did canvass with the neighbors as well. One of the reasons it was brought to our attention, there was a complaint. The complaint was addressed during this period. And we've allowed these sports courts before. So what happens in these cases is, really, we made them come in and fill out this. There's an extra charge for them for not pulling the permit. There were tickets issued in this case as well. Tickets were dismissed once they got to planning commission and they filled out all the proper paperwork and those type of things. So the tickets were dismissed. So it's the proper procedure for us to follow when these type of things happen. Again, the residents apologized. They seemed to be unaware of the ordinance and pretty much the contractor probably should have pulled that. So at the end of the day, it was approved. Planning commission heard it, addressed the neighbors' concerns, all the requirements that we put on other sports courts, lighting, sound, no pickleball, all those things were part of the planning commission's requirements.
But in essence, this will have retroactive effect. Our discussion on this. One of the residents on Oxford did call me about it. The only thing that resident was concerned about was pickleball. The other activities even without screening, it wasn't too much of a concern. It was the pickleball.
Correct.
So, at this point, I will ask for any public comment before the council discusses. Any public comment? It's a public hearing to discuss the pros and cons of whether or not this should be permitted as a special land use. Does council have discussion now about this? As you're aware, there are 7 factors that we have to go through whenever we grant a special land use exception to our code of zoning ordinances. So
Have they added some screening to it? And
They had screening in it, so it's well screened. One of the neighbors had some pucks in the yard. It was one of the issues. We talked to him, it was the father showing the kids how to shoot. Put it into the neighbor's yard, not the kids. The kids, the screening is up high enough all the way around it. There's no lighting, it's obtrusive, and everything else seemed to be in order.
okay. Yeah, the only activity that I heard from was about pickleball. So
and they're aware of that.
Yes, we at every planning commission meeting, when someone comes in for a sports court, we make sure that that's one of the rules that are dictated to them. And we've had 4 in the last year.
And Steve, I couldn't tell by the picture, but are those lights, exterior lights?
There are no lights at this time, but they've been instructed if they have lights, we have to come and review where the lights are, and they can't go onto the neighbor's property.
Also looks like they have a sound dampening mat, the base of the concrete, so it's nice.
I have a comment. Every person that's come, first of all, I'm disappointed that the owners aren't here tonight. It would have been nice since they're requesting variance and you're not here. Second, and as long as I've been on council, every single person that's come here for a variance in a timely manner before they did the project has been granted their variance. So again, I'm disappointed that the owners are not here.
Daniel, I was not at the planning commission meeting for this. And
I
I'm just not
think
sure that they were told
it's-
again, once again, I don't know.
And I can feign ignorance, but as I said to Steve earlier, there are drones in St. Clair Shores right now seeing if you're doing roofs without a permit. And if you're not, you will be fined or they will talk to you. So you need a permit for everything in building, and I think you have educated people that live in this community. I know that. So again, I'm disappointed by that. And I have a neighbor who came 8 years ago that wanted to install a pool and wanted it closer to the setback. And another neighbor didn't like him. And the zoning commission declined his request. So he had to change his design to make a smaller pool and move it closer to his home. So that's just my example.
And you raise a good point, Danielle. I mean, our work is normally on a prospective basis. So somebody coming, seeking approval, finding out that they require this exception to our zoning ordinance. And then at that point, we're dealing with it on a prospective basis.
But the builder should have known too, and he should have pulled the permit.
Yes, I would say that's normally the procedure. The contractor usually does pull the permits. It's usually not the residents that come in for the permits in most cases. But in this case, I can't say when. This was some time ago, so.
Are there other council comments?
I was at the planning commission as the council liaison for that. Mrs. Reck did appear. She answered the questions she could. I'll say that candidly, she didn't have a lot of answers to the questions. Mr. Reck was not present, who looked to be the one that most likely had the answers we were looking for as to who he contracted with, what the contract spoke to as far as permitting, whose obligation it was to get the permits. So those are still unanswered. From all accounts, from what was presented to the planning commission, the sport court is of high quality. It is properly made. It's within setbacks. This would not have been the issue that it is now. I agree with Danielle, with Dr. Geller, that had they come before, this would have been a much smoother process. I am interested to hear what the permit costs are, what the maximum penalties are that can be assessed, because I think in this case, we're talking about a 2-year difference here. While whatever the penalty is, most likely won't be a hardship to this homeowner. I think as principal, we do have to use that penalty and get as much as we can as far as monetary fees come.
I don't know, Steve, do you have any comments about, normally the maximum penalty when we had trouble with the Deeplands project was, the ultimate was $5,000. I thought that was the outer edges. Courtney, I don't know if you would know, but I thought that was the outer edges for a penalty, a fine.
I can look at your ordinance and see, but I.
So it doesn't speak to penalties. It doesn't speak to the penalties for this. I conferred with the highest source that I could at this point, which was Tommy, because he's handled the building department for years. And Tommy said the maximum that they've ever done is they've doubled the permit fees.
Which is,
I don't know what the fee for a sports court is now. I can find out for you.
Probably like $500 or something, not significant.
And I'll also say that we've used the term variance here. I think that's kind of our normal phraseology. This is a special land use request, not a variance to a proposed building structure. So I think that also limits us in some regards to the penalties that can be extracted from the homeowner in this case.
Yeah, I would think a variance would be more of a touchy subject in terms of what could be granted or not, because at that point you could be accused of spot zoning or something.
Well, you're going outside the norms, right? You need permission for that. In this case, it doesn't look like, other than putting the court in under special land use provision, there was no variance request. There was nothing unusual about this particular bill. So.
Yeah, these have been approved regularly.
Well, I met with the complaining person on the street, and she told me that it had been in existence quite some time, and asked me whether or not the city had allowed it or not. And I mean, these things it's pretty elaborate, but it's also really screened. It's really well, only on one picture do I see the other homes, and that would be on this picture. So, again, this is unusual. I think in the years I've served, we've never had anything that had retroactive effect. But I'm looking at our planning, our city planner here, and the relevant section is section 40-423 for special land use standards. And basically, the commission shall review these requests individually as to its applicability and must define affirmatively on each of the following standards. So each of them has to be agreed to by this body, this zoning board of appeals. But the first one is the proposed special land use shall be in such a location. So here's the location. And of a size and architectural character, I don't see much architecture here, but that it'll be in harmony with the appropriate and ordinary development of the surrounding neighborhood. Now, on two sides, I don't even see the neighboring homes, only on the one side here, there's a very tall screening area. You could barely see the second floor of the neighboring property. So our city planner said that the court's located in the rear yard. The location meets ordinance standards and shall impact neighborhood character and should not impact neighborhood character if proper screening is installed. So again, I see screening on, well, I don't know if this is the rear of the Oxford property. The second one is proposed use shall be of a nature that will make vehicular and pedestrian traffic no more hazardous than is normal for the district involved. And obviously, looking at the pictures, and the athletic court will have no impact on vehicular or pedestrian traffic because it's in the backyard. 3 is that the location, size, intensity, and site layout shall be designed as to eliminating possible nuisance emanating from such use which might be harmful or noxious to the occupants of any nearby permitted property. And again, this has been in existence over 2 years. We've had one complaint, but the complaint was just a general complaint that hoping that there would not be the allowance of pickleball. And our city planner said the submitted site plan provides no information on screening, lighting, landscaping, or in periods of use. So his response, he could not give a response. And at the time, I don't think we addressed the lighting issue. I don't think that we addressed the screening issue or other landscaping. But I think that's been resolved in favor of the surrounding neighborhood. And then 4, the proposed use shall be of such location and height that it will not interfere or discourage the appropriate development and use of adjacent lands and business or unreasonable affect their value. So now we're worried about valuation to the neighborhood. And again, only on this one picture do I see on the other 2 sides, the screening kind of envelops the property. So our planner said the submitted site plan provides no information on screening, which now has been rectified, lighting, which has been rectified, landscaping and periods of use. I don't think we have restrictions on use, but if there's no lights permitted, then it obviously couldn't be used in the evening, which is when it could constitute a public nuisance to the surrounding landowners. 5 is the proposed use shall relate harmoniously with the physical and economic aspects of adjacent land use. And our planner said from a physical viewpoint, concerns about noise and light are previously discussed. Economic aspects have no effect for this case, meaning that this athletic court will not have an adverse effect on the surrounding property values. And then 6 is that the proposed use shall be designated, located, planned, in operation. That's already existing, so that public health, safety, and welfare will be protected. And unlike a pool, I don't see any hazards here, or that this could constitute an attractive nuisance. So I don't see that that's an issue. And our city planner said the court will have no ill effect on public health, safety, and welfare, providing screening and noise are controlled. And the noise will be the pickleball and the absence of lights in the evening. And then the screening, of course, we can see on the 2 sides, it appears to be appropriate. And then the last standard that we have to answer affirmatively is the proposed use shall not cause substantial injury to the value of other property in the neighborhood in general. And our response from the planner is that the court shall not lessen value of surrounding properties. Again, this is a unique situation. We're trying to cure a deficiency right now in the city. Yes, Jeff?
I'm sorry, there's a structure posterior going towards Renaud. It's a batting cage. Is that the fence that?
There's a secondary structure.
Is it, how far is it from the fence line? The one
secondary
between the
structure.
neighbors.
Oh, this one? Is that
That's
part of it?
that's another structure.
I think that must be.
But there's something.
This is Renaud over here?
It's like a cage almost, it's like a
Batting
secondary.
cage, pitching cage.
Is that higher than the neighbor's fence? I mean, they would see the batting cage fence, looks like about.
Well, it looks like there's screening over here on the left of the batting cage, if that's a batting cage. And then there's clear screening over here. I'm assuming this is Oxford and then this is Renaud on the left. I can't tell from this picture, but well, here's the batting. Then it blends in with the same color.
And I think in this case, I think John may know, in one of the 2 meetings, it's not a permanent structure either. It's
Batting cage.
where the sports court is concreted in, this is a temporary structure, it's not cemented yet. If
Yeah,
I remember that.
I'd agree with that. The sport court has footings, it has cement, it's clearly a
Correct.
large project. The batting cage is simply that. I don't even know if it's fencing, it may be netting. It's probably easily
Like that.
collapsible.
Thanks.
It did not come up
Kids,
with,
correct.
with our building department as an issue at all. So I don't,
I think that's what was the case.
Well, I should also indicate for the record, for about 6 years, I had a batting cage in my backyard. It was a smaller version. It wasn't the full cage, but it was a jugs machine and I had a window and the pipes go up 14 feet, but it was portable. I mean, it was not a permanent structure. I have pipes in the ground that I never pulled out, but the structure itself is. So I don't think, well, I don't know. I didn't see that at first, but again, looking at the building construction of the athletic courts, looks like it has special drainage. And I mean, it's got limestone surrounding it. So, well, at this point, I invite a motion to accept this special land use. Somebody want to make the motion?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? We've had good discussion. Most of the discussion concerns the fact that we're doing this on a deficiency basis. We're not doing it prospectively, we're doing it retroactively. But in light of, again, the one person who did complain about 4 or 5 months ago, maybe brought this to our attention, lives a few houses away on Oxford, and their only concern was whether or not there was going to be pickleball. That was the only concern. And then she did raise the issue about lights. She said, as long as there was a reasonable time frame, and she would be okay with that too. So, well, any other discussion? If not,
Mr. Mayor, I have one question. Whose authority is to set the penalty? Is that building
our
department?
building department.
Not us.
Okay, we have a motion. It's been seconded. All those that are in favor of adopting the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay.
All right.
6-1, Bruce. And I understand the objection. I mean, again, it's one thing if somebody just didn't know, but this is pretty sophisticated structure. Looking at the limestone surrounding it, I mean, the builder had to have been aware. I mean, you know, I would think that unless they're not from this locale and they're not, but like Danielle said, I mean, almost everything requires a building permit. So, okay, it's passed. Next item is public comment. Is there any public comment? It's not reports by chairpersons. Gail?
Do we have to come out of?
Oh, I'm sorry. I need a motion to come out of our ZBA hearing and into our position as city council.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Hello, everyone. The invoice payments for the month, $335,000 was cut in checks relative to payment of the same, all routine payments, a couple exceptions. One of the mortgage company services that pay property taxes on behalf of homeowners overpaid 15, 20 different homeowners. A total of $30,000 were collected in overpayments.
That's the one that's listed.
That's refunded and that's on it. Another resident had an oversight, paid twice. Then you have your South Macomb disposal, or South Macomb sanitation was $65,000, Great Lakes Water was $65,000. Flowers for the season, which were reimbursed through the garden project, $5,500 for the season. You had a repair, a main water line repair at Art Tucker, $4,750. Other than that, they're all the normal day-to-day maintenance.
Does anybody have questions for Dan?
The Waterworks metrology, what is that? That's 4,971.
That's the new service you're looking at, Steve?
Water meter readers. I thought it was, that's,
Yeah, it sounds like it.
It's our current water meter readers. That's, we need to do that.
okay.
And there are two checks I don't recognize that are probably normal. DC3 Inc. Says service contract. It's from 9/20.
Yeah, that's our internet or IT company that they use.
And the other one just says Eugene Tutag, and it says,
He's your building department official. He's contractual basis, retired from the woods. Does a great job. Goes out in the fields, inspects.
and he inspects.
He inspects
He's our building.
construction projects, electrical, plumbing.
Are there any other questions? If not, I need a motion to approve this check register vote.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Dale. Finances?
On the finance report, the revenue for the general fund came in at 6.4 million year to date. The majority of that, $6,070,000 is from your property tax collections, which represents 97% of what you're going to collect this year. 97% of your tax revenues are in. Expenditures are light. We're only through September, $1.4 million. We still have pension contributions there. Annual pension contributions, a lot of health insurance costs coming up, again, wages for the year, and so on. Major and local streets, very little activity. Major street and local street revenues coming in were $46,000 and $20,000 respectively. Those are motor vehicle highway tax funds that are returned to us. Expense on the expense side, there's virtually none in the major street. Local street, there's been $70,000 of road improvements we paid in July and August. Other than that, with those funds, you have a fair amount of surplus in reserves to cover upcoming road projects that I believe Mike and Steve will bring up later tonight. Water and sewer fund, $800,000 in revenue, $500,000 in expenses, still have debt payments. And again, most of the year still to come. And the marina really had no activity this year to date since July 1, other than a bond payment of interest of $47,000. So that's it on the finances.
Dale, have our auditors come
Next week.
next week?
But the majority of the work they request over the last month is basically uploaded, sent, and they have it on their system. So we're hoping they've actually taken the time to review a lot of it to cut the field time down.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sandra first.
No, I didn't write it.
You mentioned the Marina Bond Fund, and to my recollection, I think it's in 2026 that bond is potentially callable by us if we so choose to do that. I don't know what the interest rate is on that bond.
I'll have to look. But you've got a good interest rate. It was a 20-year note. You're paid off, I think, 8 years. The payments around 240. It's going to hover around 240 for something. I'll look and I'll get back to you.
I think it had a call feature after 10 years.
After 10, yeah, you're 8 into it right now.
Anybody else have questions of Dale? Thanks, Dale. Sandra, Finance Committee?
It was a very short meeting, very uneventful. The only thing we discussed was getting new water meters replaced, and it's still under discussion. And I believe that Mike is going to have a presentation about it. Is that correct?
Not tonight. I'll just
Okay.
have some more brief.
And the next meeting is November the 12th.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. Public safety?
No, he's not here. In our report that they have nothing to report.
Oh, good. No news is good news. Okay. Public Works, Mike?
I am here, but my report is short. We should be all set for the Boo Fest tomorrow. Big thank you to Andre, our master gardener, who set up the decorations around City Hall and across the street at the park. A bigger thank you to Helen Bai and her beautification crew who volunteered to help decorate the park for tomorrow. Around town, road construction is back. They started on Willow Tree, where they're doing spot repairs. Other streets include Willow Tree, the Williston subdivision, Stratton and Clearview. There might be a couple more that I'm missing. They're all concrete slab replacements. He should be in and out of here in a few weeks. A couple of the DPW guys, led by Bruce Haynes, have refurbished the school bell tower that's right out here. We were just going to put a coat of paint on it, but it turns out a lot of it was rotting. So it was a little bit bigger job than we anticipated. But the rotting wood was replaced. There actually is a light fixture in there that hasn't worked for a few years. That has been replaced and is now working. It's been sealed up and primed and will be finished with paint this week. During that, we also power washed the brick structure that surrounds it. Speaking of refurbishment, Bit of Gary was in town a few weeks ago and put our field back together over there. They did a great job. I've gotten nothing but compliments on their and questions about what kind of grass seed they use, because it just looks beautiful. So we thank them. The fence is up, the gate's up, everything's working properly, and it looks almost like they were never there. A volunteer from the Grosse Pointe Shores Woods Little League came and painted the dugout and backstop fences at the baseball field last week. So those are looking nice with a fresh coat of black paint. So thank you also to the league for helping out with that. In the water department, Kevin Hartman completed year 2 of 3 of the Michigan Public Service Institute. He has enjoyed his time there while learning how to be a better leader. And finally, I would like to end with a friendly reminder that the Grosse Pointe Shores is hosting an Electronics Waste Day on October 26th. It will be held at our park on that Saturday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And it is open to residents from the farms, the city, and the park. That's it. That's all I have for you today. If you have any questions.
Good report, Mike. Any questions?
Sure, Don.
I did have one. You mentioned the Wilson subdivision is having some concrete steps replaced, which I've seen being done already. There's also a lot of cement repair where I'm not sure if it's being addressed this time or not, like maybe 8 inches missing of concrete in between slabs in many places.
And Willis and Sub?
Yes. Is there any plans to do anything with that, like patching or anything like that, or is that just?
Possibly. I'd have to know exactly what you're talking about. We have, Steve has the list, I think. We got a couple places. I know Willison is the approach to Lakeshore.
Greenbrier, Fontana,
Yeah.
and Wilson are all being addressed in some form, all different varies. Greenbrier is only $16,000 worth, Wilson $65,000, Fontana $32,000. So
I just know
their piece middling.
Councilman Barrett's house, the piece is missing there 8 inches.
Okay, what's your,
So curvy.
if I know your address, and we might be able to figure it out.
At 59.
Okay,
5859.
we'll look into it. I can't.
We live across the street from each other.
So we both see them every day.
Yeah. We are doing stuff on Greenbrier, Fontana.
Yeah,
Greenbrier, we're doing, I think, 2 different spots on Greenbrier. So it maybe. I'll have to
They've had
look
a
at it.
truck park there for about 2 weeks now.
If it's not and it's bad enough, I'll have them take care of it right now while they're there.
Great.
So I'll look into it.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Mike. Good report.
Thank you.
Park committee?
So we didn't have a Parks Committee meeting this month. We will have one on November 19th, the same day as the next council meeting. Again, we're having the Boo Fest tomorrow night at 6 p.m. And again, I want to thank the volunteers and DPW folks that have really contributed to that. We did have one event since the last council meeting I should mention. It was the Century Pickleball Tournament, which was held on September 21st. And it was truly a battle of the ages, or I probably should say more correctly, it was a battle of the aged, as the age range was between 101 years old to 140 years old for the teams. And as it turns out, age does prevail in the sense that youth prevails. So in the championship game, the 101-year-old team beat the 140-year-old team. And that was, the winners were Jeff Kruger and Jonathan Nance, and they beat George Case and someone named Don Schroeder. So we were the oldest that they played. And then third place went to Roy Voorhees and Leonard Sachs. So I want to thank everyone for playing that day and contributing to another Century tournament. That's all I have for my report.
Well, Don, thanks for organizing it. And it sounds like we have some really good participation. So thank you for
Some good players there.
being involved. Any other questions about parks? Non-harbor, Dan?
Good evening. The Harbor Committee met last Tuesday. We talked about a number of maintenance issues and including the fact that dock boxes will need to be cleared out by the 15th of November to allow for redecking underneath the dock boxes, which will be a nice capper to a lot of work that's been done on the docks. And in some of those cases, there's some rot and algae and other things. I did, Mike, do as I promised you. I put a post on Facebook reminding folks that we'll need them to empty their dock boxes by the 15th and remove their locks. Otherwise, Mike will be the winner of many old lines, empty buckets, and spiders. So hopefully people help you out, Mike, and the team out by emptying their dock boxes. We should remind them again, and I think Courtney is contacting them either via email or certainly by their renewal notices to remind them to do that. So that'll be good. As far as rates for 2025, we 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I think it was in October of 22, maybe in the November 22 council meeting, the Harbor Committee recommended 3% rate increases for the next 3 years, which included 2025. So there's no recommendation for 2025 because that was covered by that recommendation and subsequent council approval. For 2026, we'll take a look at, all the projects that we have or think that we need to do over the next couple of years, how much funding we have already, considering the bond payments, et cetera, and make a recommendation at that time. However, we did look at non-resident rates, and because we had more vacancies this year and had a higher percentage of non-renewals by non-residents, feels like a lot of double negatives there. We've decided to look at those rates, which were 150% of the resident rates, and the Harbor Committee voted to recommend to the council lowering those rates and considering Dale's work on kind of a break-even point, if you will, of what would be a reasonable rate for non-residents. The Harbor Committee considered that and is recommending to the council for a vote 125% of resident rates to try to maximize the occupancy of the harbor and to overall generate more revenue, even though on a net basis, we're lowering the non-resident fees. Again, non-resident options are open to all Point residents. So non-Grosse Pointe Shores, but Grosse Pointe residents. And despite, in my opinion, us having one of the best harbors, or if not the best harbor, I do think it's appropriate to consider that rate change. Our next meeting, I believe, is on March 11th, which is timed to be the week before the council meeting in March. And that is my report. Happy to take any questions. Don.
Very nice report, Dan. I just have some economic questions about the supply and demand that you mentioned. Certainly, it's not unique to our park to have lower marina wells filled. I think we had 8 or 9 not filled this year. Grosse Pointe Yacht Club had, they were completely filled last year with a waiting list. And there were, I think, minus 23 or 28 wells unfilled there this year as well. So it's certainly supply and demand as people have perhaps realized the economics after COVID, when realized that we have more than just 2 years to live. But so people are spending their money less. Being that it's supply and demand, and we're raising our rates by 3% for residents next year at a decline in resident wells, is it appropriate still to raise it 3%, or can we redact that and resume maybe a normal balance? That's the first question. Don't answer yeah, because it ties in the second question. That's really the marina bond. So I know that the marina fund is a proprietary fund. I mean, we can make a profit and continue to keep that profit to pay for expenses in the future. I believe that the marina fund has made a profit, around $50,000 to $100,000 a year for the last several years. And so I think there's a surplus right now around $300,000 in that fund, I think. Is that correct? Yeah. So if we have a $300,000 surplus right now in that fund, do we need to raise the rates 3% next year, being that it's supply and demand, and maybe encourage more residents to have a well next year? It may be more profit for us to have a slightly lower, or the fixed rate of this year, and maybe have more people fill the wells next year because it'll add to the amount of profit that we'll make. So just a thought on supply and demand and profit.
Yeah, so on the governance issue of whether or not you can undo what's been decided, I'll leave that to all of you to decide. However, it is something that John and I discussed before the meeting, and there's lots of opinions now that will follow what I say next, because I haven't studied it directly, but as it relates to is 3% appropriate, just given inflation and where it's been, I think it is appropriate if you just look at that measure. If you look at what's going on at other marinas and including, public for-profit marinas, I think there's been an exodus to JB, for example, which is a good, very nice safe harbor, at least for non-residents. So that's what prompted us to consider changing the rate for non-residents. Will a holding rates flat draw more people in? I doubt it. 3%, A, isn't a lot of money, and B, I think it's more of a matter of what they're doing with their boating habits than it is what the well rate is. So while I favor lower prices generally, I think the 3% given inflation isn't a lot of money. 2, I don't think it's going to change the occupancy. And 3, what I'd like to study for next year is how much we have in that kitty and kind of play forward what the maintenance is before we start to change the rates. I think it could very well be the recommendation to hold them flat next year. But again, I think I'd better serve the council by doing that study and making a recommendation with that information.
And the other thing I think you have to consider is our bond payments for the Marina Fund are ballooning. Will be escalating, I believe. So
They're actually going to dip for the next couple of years, and you're right around 240. It's going to come down to 220-ish, 230 in the next 2 years. Then it's going to go up to 260. Then it flattens out again.
Yeah.
So you're going to see a little dip, but then it comes up.
yeah,
The other consideration is if the economy were to dip and people decided to sell their boats, not put their boats in, and you just saw greater vacancy and a greater loss of revenue, how, we could do a quick study to figure out at 95% occupancy, how much of the reserves do you eat up if keeping a full harbor is what's needed to kind of keep pace with our bond. It's an easy number, it's a quick model to do.
Yeah, I can note you had 9 unoccupied wells. So the unrealized revenue by not having them rented was $29,000. Bringing up rates brings in 3% will bring in about $10,000. So it's trying to find that right balance.
Sure. And just, Dan, I'm just looking at the list, so I brought the well rates with me, just so an idea. For the smaller wells you're looking at, I'm just running down the categories. $33, $40, $40, $36. You get to the medium size, $67 increase. And for the largest boats, you're looking at anywhere from $125 to $158 are the highest on those. Just to give you an idea of what you're talking about.
Yes,
Like
thank you.
3%.
And Steve just illustrated the point that I'm arguing against myself because I'm one of the largest wells. So it's against my own benefit, but I do think it's appropriate just to keep enough of a kitty. But I will study with the help of Dale and Steve and Courtney in the committee for those finances.
good.
Yes. Oh,
I was going to say, because the economics are really crucial to this. It's been a self-sufficient fund for people that want to vote, and it's not really being paid for by tax dollars. It's being paid for by the voters themselves. So we kind of hope to maintain that same direction if we can. So.
Dan, I remember some years ago, maybe 10 years ago, we had more vacancies. There was a recession in process. So one of the council members, Dan Schulte, came up with the idea of buy a house, get a well. Well, for 1 year, and then obviously at that point, they'd have a year to experience the beautiful marina that we have and would convince them to stay. A couple of years ago, a doctor called me. He had just bought a house in Grosse Pointe Shores and asked me if we had that program. I said, no, not right now. We have that program. And he lived here a couple of years and now he moved to Birmingham. But I'm just wondering if, depending on the economy and 8 or 9 vacancies, that's quite a bit because we have 140 wells, not counting the jet skis, don't we, roughly?
We have 134 wells, yeah, something like that.
That sounds right.
With the jet skis?
No, and then
133.
133. And then there are probably 20 jet ski spots, give or
On
take.
pods, right?
Yeah, and floating
Were
docks.
the jet ski
30.
pods all taken?
30.
No, they were not taken. I know last year they
There
were.
may have been 10 open still, I think.
Wow.
On the jet skis?
Big difference.
But they don't generate the revenue that you're going to collect on your wells. I think one thing like you mentioned, Steve and I and yourself, we can sit down. If you had $29,000 worth of unrented wells and your 3% brings in 10, it's like you're saying, the focus is how do we get more people in there? Did you give a new resident a 50% discount?
Well, I don't know.
I don't know.
It was kind of a nice gimmick, marketing employee that.
So I bought a house in the shores during that period. I had a boat when I bought the house and I sold the boat to finance the house. So I never got to use it. If you want to bring it back, you want to grandfather me in, I will gladly take that.
But I think the very next year, all the wells were taken. And then a lot of people said, well, you have a beautiful marina. And so we had a pretty high percentage retentions of the people there.
Yeah, I don't know if good it would feel if you're paying the guy next year's got it for free.
Right. For 1 year.
Big
Well, I
discount.
know. It's good, Dan, we're being proactive, and I think I'm a little sad to hear about the 8 or 9 vacancies. Because the year or 2 years before that, we were maybe 1 or 2 vacancies.
Yeah, I mean, I know personally of three non-residents that moved that, gave rise to those. And price was the reason each time. A couple of them were yacht club members. And for whatever reason, they weren't keeping their smaller boat at the yacht club and they were keeping it here, but they moved them to JB in 2 of those cases. So price does matter when you're getting into the inflation or the factor, 150 versus 125. I think 125 will bring people back in and that will close the gap on the lost revenue. So I think that'll generate revenue. The lower.
Well, the fact that the yacht club had trouble filling their marina, because a couple of years ago, they contacted us and said, we'll take any excess.
Yeah, I remember
that.
that.
Yeah. So things have changed.
Yep, they have.
That's fine.
But Dan, thank you for your in-depth discussion on this, but yeah, I'd rather see everything flow.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Energy, and I just don't know how best to do it. And if you would think somebody with a boat, a larger boat, would not be price sensitive, particularly because we're just so convenient. It's just easy to get in, easy to get off. You're right there.
There's one other point I should point out, and it's something we discussed in the harbor committee. We are an attractive harbor, and one of the issues we've talked about before is the goose droppings. And this year there was a marked improvement, I think both by the crew cleaning up, but also the dog that was going up and down.
Trace.
It was Trace, I think can be credited with some of that. I think the lights and the lasers will be an interesting idea, but that makes a giant difference in how people, perceive the harbor. I mean, the harbor's fit and finish is fantastic. The floating docks are great, rising or lowering water levels. It's really, really a good product, but the goose poop was kind of tarnishing that. And I think it's largely or in much better control. And I think the sprays on the grass and things like that just really weren't that effective. But I think the Trace and Mike's crew and the lights, combined to be a pretty powerful punch. And I think that's what will draw people in, and price won't matter as much to them.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Dan.
Yep.
We had a good discussion about this, so
Yep.
thank you.
Thanks.
Infrastructure report, Bob?
Did have a meeting. Mike covered most of the work, the major work that's going on within the state presently.
Are we still waiting on Wayne County for anything, or as far as you
Not that I know.
limestone chips? And at one time they promised to give us limestone chips, Mike.
They did that.
Yeah,
That's all.
okay.
That's all. Whatever it was.
Because that helped by Deepland. I mean, it helped by some of our real dangerous areas. So, okay. Thank you, Bob. Improvement Foundation, Sandra?
Yeah, we met to discuss raising funds for the Pool and Community Center complex. We're gathering information and putting together a plan, which will include setting goals, building a team, creating a timeline, and putting together the case for support. We will be asking for the board support as well as communications committee to help us come up with the case and produce some literature. And that's basically what we have. We're continuing to work on it and we're making good advances.
Okay,
That's all I
good,
have.
Sandra. Any questions for Sandra? Improvement
I
fund?
do. So is there a timeline when you're gonna break ground?
That is one thing that we have to, it all depends on the fundraising efforts, where we're at. So we are looking at contacting people. So that's what we're coming up with, a plan and a timeline. And it all will depend on the first initial fundraising, which is the quiet, they call it the quiet phase. So it's not gonna be public. We're gonna do that at the very beginning. Later on, when we collect 50 to 70% of the funds, then we'll open it to everybody else.
So at this point, are there big donors that have committed?
We have not started that. We are just in the planning stages of sitting down, figuring out who we're gonna ask, how we're gonna present it to them. We need to come up with brochures, photographs and a whole presentation so that we can present it to the donors, potential donors. And that's what we're working on, coming up with a whole plan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sandra. Communications Committee, Danielle?
We had our last meeting on September 19th. It was a Zoom meeting. Basically discussing the potential of adding a new logo, look, or design. There was also discussion, I know Dr. Schroeder had brought up the fact that we were quote unquote per Ted woefully behind on our volunteer appreciation. Mr. Katulish, Ted really wants to do something more with that. So that was also brought up in his communication blitz, or his plan, so to speak. This is the option of perhaps coming up with he had 7 ideas for recognizing volunteers in the community. I had the opportunity to discuss with our city planner that maybe we could alternate something in our spotlight instead of a arbitrary resident that people may know or heard great things about. There might be somebody that volunteers, and the usual suspects are fabulous. Ted is fabulous. Miriam Matuja is fabulous. Helen Bai is fabulous. But there are other people that work in committees with them that maybe we can spotlight. So I think that might be a good start to alternate on the shore spotlight as opposed to volunteering in the community.
Can you describe how the spotlight occurs, like from a name is given? Is there who's
He asks for,
Final say.
Ted asks for suggestions, and if he doesn't get any, he just comes up with them on his own. And what he does is he does reach out to the resident and see if they would be willing to be featured, so to speak. And some people are very humble or shy and they just don't want to. So and he's asked again, if anybody has any ideas, please share with him.
Yeah, he once called me and asked me if I could recommend, and I came up with 3 or 4 residents that, one of them that he ended up picking for his spotlight. So
And I had
there's no science here.
No, there's no science. I had
there's no
recommended
sciences.
Bob Cleary to him, Robert Cleary. He's an attorney, and I think he's been living in Grosse Pointe Shore since he lives on South Deeplands, and then he moved over to Valentine since he's probably at least 4 or 5 years old, and he's 73. So just for that reason, and so I was just trying to look at somebody that's been here for a long time. It would be nice if somebody has a younger resident. I was even thinking, I think last night I was thinking about showcasing your daughter. She's got her and her husband have a busy life. They have 4 children. There's every event that the city has to offer, so it's nice to see them. So if anybody has any ideas,
I think that.
let Ted know, because
I think Ted should be in the spotlight because he's done so much volunteer work for our city. He's been a real strong advocate. As he says, he comes to every event, takes pictures. He's done a lot for our community. But I think he'd feel funny about having himself be in the spotlight. I really think
Well,
that.
he might want
As
to
a
write his
council,
own
we should
interview,
have
that's the
that.
problem.
So one more thing, I think he's done so many great things. The idea about rebranding the city, I thought initially was kind of I didn't get it, to be honest with you. And I've been speaking with more and more people and I'm starting to get it more. Like initially I thought, the video that we have for the city of the Short Lake Nova, it's a beautiful video. But I didn't initially think, how's that gonna draw people in? And told by people younger than myself, which is most people now, that people go online and they Google Grosse Pointe Shores, that there's a link comes up and they see that and they may have not really considered this area before and seeing that video may help them to maybe purchase a home here. But one thing I kind of disagreed with is with Ted, he's done a lot of great things, is changing the logo that we already have. And I brought some of the shirts that we've done for the fun run that we've had for many years, which are pretty classic. They have the overlapping GP and the shores on them, which we've used here for years. I'm kind of going back in the history of this, but this is a hat from 2002. And it's a Grosse Pointe hat. It's got the exact same GP overlapping. This is actually from the Top Guard competition with all the Grosse Pointes in it. So it's a kind of a iconic time tradition logo that we have that maybe, I don't know if Ted realized that before when he thought that maybe no logo. This is a varsity jacket from Grosse Pointe North High School. Look at this, it's got the overlapping GP because this is the icon of Grosse Pointe. Grosse Pointe South has the same icon, it's just theirs is maize and blue instead of yellow and green. I was at St. Paul's Church this last week, and they had it was 2 weeks ago actually, they had the sports mass. And at that mass, all the St. Paul athletes had their jerseys on or shirts on. And they have the same iconic logo. It's SP with the same exact font and overlap. So it's not just Grosse Pointe Shores that has this recognized cosmetically designed logo. It's kind of embedded in Grosse Pointe. I mean, this jersey has been since 1974 when Grosse Pointe North came about and was a Grosse Pointe High, which is now Grosse Pointe South before that. So to change an icon with that history, I think probably, Ted is fairly new to Grosse Pointe. I'm not sure he knew the history that we have, the rich history that we have in this.
He lived in the woods prior, and I think he's coming, he just wanted something a little fresh, and it is iconic, I get that. But it is hard, like Grosse Pointe Shores, Grosse Pointe, he wanted something that just differentiates it. And as I have shared with each one of you, Grosse Pointe Woods has an arbor theme. Grosse Pointe Park has a sailboat. The city of St. Clair Shores, they, as an example, they have a sailboat on theirs. So it's something a little different. It's a little bit more modern. That's all. He was looking to do something modern. And I think the plan was to do something subtly at first, to basically not change vehicles, maybe see it like on a Facebook, in an email, or on merchandise going forward. And I think pretty much I got a straw poll from all of you that the vast majority like some kind of acronym, some GPS. But just maybe probably a different font.
I guess, I think the change, Ted works for the University of Michigan as well. And I don't think the University of Michigan is going to change their block out. It's been a historic icon and it's rich in the city. And I think it would be, I'm proud of our icon we have right now, I'm proud of our logo. And I hate to change it to be more modern. Like I said, I don't think Michigan State's going to change their S because it looks like a block S. I think people recognize that, and the Michigan Staters are proud of their S. I think Michigan fans are proud of their M. I'm proud of our GP Shores.
What about the young people? Do you think the young people feel the same?
I hope so. My daughter went to the University of Michigan. She's very happy with the block M. So I believe so. I don't think we ever did a poll of residents before we thought to spend money to develop a new design for this. I wish we would have done that initially, but we did not. We just went ahead and spent $3,500 to help design something that
Well,
frankly, I'm not sure there was a need for it. I mean,
It was presented in the spring by him on a presentation that he wanted to do that. And I did approach Steve prior to the budget year that money was still sitting there for communications not spent. So this wasn't brought up last minute. I know it was brought up in the spring and he had a detailed discussion about it. And I did give him some pushback at the time about it, but he had his I guess analogy was that the University of Michigan and Michigan State have their seals and then they have their block. And the seals are for official paperwork for attorneys and what have you. We have the official seal, which makes no sense to me, but they're official seal. We've got unicorns or elks standing up. I don't know, and it's all in Latin. What does that have to do with Grosse Pointe? I'm just being honest. What does it have to do with Grosse Pointe?
Looks cool, huh?
But there's nothing nautical about it. I mean, there's nothing about, it's
very elegant though.
yes, but it doesn't mean anything to me. It's not relevant to Grosse Pointe Shores. So I guess that was his. Yes,
You were inquiring about younger people.
yes.
I have 4 kids in their 20s. They love GP.
Okay. They like the GPS. I mean, just to be clear, because
GP Shorts.
Yeah, GP
Shorts, yes.
Like, this, this, GP
yeah,
Shorts.
so he had 4 icons that I sent to each one of you that were like that, and some of them were just a slightly different font on the shores. That was it. So I guess that's what I asked you, is just
Yeah, but the GP.
be a little more stylish.
But the GP was not overlapping, which has been the traditional icon of Grosse Pointe. I mean, they're all attractive, it just doesn't have the history and the depth and the richness and the legacy that this current logo that we've had for years has. So I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the logo that we had for many years, the GP Shores logo, as our official Grosse Pointe Shores logo.
I mean, to match everything that.
You mean that the same logo that's on our folders there? Yes, that's that's the motion I'd like to make.
I'd like to speak before we.
Well, we need a
Did you
second.
see
before-
what I sent you?
I did. We need a second before we
There's no
discuss it.
overlap on the shore.
Sorry, point of order. We have to have a second. So if we don't have a second, then there's no point in this discussion.
Don, there's no point of order. I'm giving I didn't ask.
A point of order is because I made a
This
motion.
is just
No.
this was a discussion.
A second, but I made a motion. Now we have.
Was it second? Okay.
Robert's rules.
So remembering what Ted presented to us a month or two ago.
Yeah, I got it.
As I recall, his presentation was essentially 2-pronged. One was to possibly modernize, stylize our logo. And the second was to actually give us an idea of how it should be implemented. And it was a little illuminating to me because while someone that's I've grown up in Grosse Pointe Shores and I've seen that logo as far as I can recall, but I've seen it sporadically. And this was my takeaway. You know, having been in county and state government, we and now city government for a few years, the seal of that government entity is I don't know if sacred is the right word, but it holds a very special purpose and is to be used in very certain circumstances. In fact, I believe it's a crime to utilize the state seal of Michigan in anything other than official purposes. It's a misdemeanor to use that on your own and adopt it and play with it and put it out there. So our seal is there for our official matters. It's going to be on ordinances, it's going to be on resolutions, it's going to be on anything official from Grosse Pointe Shores government. Our logo, like the Block M, like the Block S, like any logo you can think of, Coca-Cola, whatever, that is used to remind us and to visualize something, and is to be used in a more casual fashion. I appreciated Ted's comments of we need a logo that is used uniformly, I think most importantly, and used regularly, like our binders, which the 7 of us see when we use them, but nobody else really does. But when we have the Boo Fest, when we have 4th of July, when we have these events, when we're dealing with raising money for the pool as we're going to, seeing that logo, whatever it is, front and center, and it triggers people, it reminds people, this is a Grosse Pointe Shores event, this is Grosse Pointe Shores. If I get a Grosse Pointe Shores t-shirt, I expect to see the same logo on it that anybody else who gets any other kind of t-shirt or hat from Grosse Pointe Shores. You want that uniformity. With that said, I do like the traditional logo because it has been around a long time and it is very recognizable. It differentiates us from the other 4 Grosse Pointes, but it also includes us in the other 4 Grosse Pointes and the high schools because you see GP and your next instant thought, and this is funny because people that live outside of Grosse Pointe don't understand this, and my wife was one of those folks until she lived here. Why are there 5? Why can't there just be 1? Well, every one is different. You're nuts, she would tell me. It took her about a month of driving around the 5 cities to realize that the shores is not the woods, is not the farms, is not the city, is not the park. But it's Grosse Pointe first. And every one of the logos that we see has GP somewhere in there front and center, and either shores underneath, farms underneath, or north or south or something like that. I personally like our traditional logo. I appreciate everything Ted has done to bring this issue before us because I think it is important to start utilizing it in a uniform way and in a more obvious way. And that is my takeaway from everything he's done. And I know he's a branding expert, and I know he's very good at what he does. But I do think we have a very traditional logo for a very traditional neighborhood. It fits, and I personally would like to see it continue. I would like to see it used much more outwardly, openly, and obviously.
And I mean, that's exactly why I made the motion, because it has been introduced. And really, it's to commend Ted Tulich. That's the purpose of having the logo. We had it, we were misappropriating it. We weren't using it correctly. And we should follow his course for a brand and use it correctly. And that's why I made the motion today.
Well, I'd like to add something as well. Next year, I'll be in the city 30 years. 30 years passed by that quickly. And I remember my children were swimming and I had hats and different clothing. You know, when I see our GPS Shores, Ted has the nice green one, Grosse Pointe Shores t-shirt. And it makes me very proud. It makes me very proud of this city. The reason we have a communications committee is that unlike a private business, I mean, we don't have an advertising budget. And so the purpose was to try to promote, you know, whether one of the first things that we did, Bob Liggett came to me and said, what can I do to help the city? I said, Bob, I'd like to have some money to write a book about the city. Very proud of the city, the background of the city. I'm proud of the Alfred Glancy Mansion on the corner where you now live, John. Looking at the Sheldon
parents
House.
met. They met the Glancy
Oh,
estate.
did
They
you?
lived on Balance.
Oh,
right around the corner.
oh, wow. And you look at the mansion on Weber and the book was very well written. Mark Wallweber hired a very good writer, and he got a collection of pictures from the Ann Arbor Historic Library, and it was intended to be given to people moving to the city, kind of like buy a house, get a well. But here, you buy a house and you get a welcome kit. The welcome kit came with a book. We had 500 published, I think, 500 that he paid for. And so, but you're right, there's a lot of tradition here. There's a huge proud factor. Danielle sent the 4 other images, and they're very close. They're very close. 2 of them are very close, except for they are contiguous, but they're not overlapping. And, but I mean, I look at I think where I was unsure of, and I wish Ted was here today, is, where do we put our informal Grosse Pointe overlapping shores? I like my business card, okay? I like this. Now it's got our corporate seal, and I bought 2 of these from the Improvement Foundation. This has our corporate seal. So I guess my question, if Ted was here, is I thought he said that if we had letterhead that we use consistently and regularly, we had letterhead, what would the letterhead have? Would it have our corporate seal or would it have this?
Letterhead would have the corporate seal.
So what Ted told me, and let me say this, I don't think really Ted he's okay with whatever you decide. Now, part of the contract was, remember, it was $4,600. Only a small portion of that was towards the logo. The rest there are other things in that contract that still have to be fulfilled. So that was just a small portion. But part of this logo also is they're going to refine the logo, whatever you decide, they'll come back, they're going to refine it a little bit, show you pictures, because there are going to be places where they're going to use different sizes of it, different configurations, but the same, whatever logo you decide. It's going to go on any letterhead, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, any signage, memorabilia, those type of things. It will be just like where you would see a Block M. It would be on all those type of things, on hats, on shirts, on whatever. Right now, we kind of have that GP Shores on our dress shirts that we wear. And so.
But what about the card? He could keep his here.
Yeah, because I have that on my card. I don't think, now he may say going forward, we want to change that. It's a good question. I think
I wanted for official paperwork cards would keep the seal. But for anything else, like you said, like something out in the park or on the shirts that you wear.
Like a Rolex clock has to.
Right.
Sure.
But
and no matter what
my point
happens.
being is this is different than what Chief Mitchell was wearing. It was different. The font is slightly different. It's like that there's not uniformity.
And there should be.
Right. I mean, he has GP Shores, but it's different. He has GP. It's different, smaller, and the font is a little tighter. So.
It's not overlapping or
No.
it's contiguous?
Yes, there's different. So I that's what I'm trying to.
But if you, I think if
This is not the same as what
again,
he was
you have the
wearing.
final say,
It's
so
close, but not the same.
if he tells you he doesn't want them on your cards and you decide you want them on your cards, it's gonna be our decision to make. You can, you can override something, but I think what we do at this point is, if that's what the body wants to do, is we send it back to him. He'll send it back to get it clarified and send it back to you with a picture of what it would look like.
You can save the box. I don't know.
No, we have cards. It's okay, but none of us have cards. Just you have a card.
Okay, motion, we've had good discussion. It's been seconded, John seconded. All those in favor of keeping our historic, our traditional Grosse Pointe shores, the overlap, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed?
I
Okay,
oppose.
okay, opposed.
Sorry, I vote to adopt it, not to oppose.
Okay, so 6-1. Samuel, you were against it? Okay, 6-1.
Sticking with.
Don, I have a question. Is that your original varsity jacket from high school?
So I went to Traverse City High School. This is my daughter's original high school jacket, who's now 40 years old on Saturday.
That would be a compliment.
It's 22 years old, but it still fits.
Well, that was a good discussion. Legal report?
Mr. Mayor, excuse me. Since the date of the city council meeting that was held on September 17, 2024, the city attorney has been engaged in the following activities on behalf of the city. Those include general legal services that were conducted in accordance with the general legal services retainer agreement with the city, and including, attendance at city meetings and monitoring of current legal developments affecting city operations, review of city council meeting agenda, materials and minutes, review of city planning commission meeting agenda materials and minutes, advising the city regarding online news developments potentially affecting the city operations, consulting on a day-to-day basis with the city regarding various other administrative and procedural matters. There have been no extraordinary matters this month that are outside of the scope of our general services in the retainer agreement. And Brian, as many of you might know, is winding down from enjoying his son's wedding. So he's unavailable for questions for the next day or so. So if you have anything, Steve can probably address it.
Okay, very good report. Any questions? Courtney, this might not be fair to ask, but I'm now looking at the shirt. Do we need to trademark that?
I was going to say, if you're going to.
I mean, don't we need to protect the intellectual value of this property?
Well, one of the things I was thinking about is the fact that you've been discussing how similar they are to other organizations, like school districts operate independently, so they might have their own trademark. So you want to be really careful about that if you're trying to mirror it or something like that, if you're stepping on their toes. So that's something, if you were to continue to go down that avenue, you want to explore to make sure, you know, we're not violating any other trademarks or anything like that. But it sounds like they've been around for a really long time, so maybe there's not, but I don't know. I would have to get our IT attorney involved or.
I was just wondering. I mean, we talk about it and the tradition, and I'm assuming this is over 30. I mean, I've been here, let's say 30 years, and this was around back then.
Yeah, we've been using this for 30 years, so. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, you can do a lot of, you can have a sports court in the back of your house for 2 years. Yeah,
I guess you're right.
Things happen, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks, Courtney.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Manager's report, Steve?
Yeah, Mayor, just a couple things. Most of these are going to be covered under new business, but we're on our third chance for a grant for the seawall. I think from our last meeting with the feds, NOAA, we're close on the list, they say. Now, this is the grant that would change only a portion of the wall to include increasing fisheries, soft shore type of thing. And there's only 3 projects on the federal list right now, and we're one of the 3 projects. Still not, when we see it, we'll get excited, but they tell us that we have a much better shot this year, and if not, we'll go next year, and maybe we'll only be 2 on the list next year. So we're narrowing it down, and this is just to do the original study. This is to pay for all the studying, the preparation of the wall to see, what the depths, all the integral parts of that. We're looking at tune of $5 million probably. So it's just step 1 in this process.
Besides yourself, who's in our proponent? Is it state level or federal level?
So we have NOAA involved. It's primarily on a federal level, but we've asked all of our Congress people, Shree, the county, Peters, Stabenow, everyone has wrote letters of reference, Kevin Hertel, Tate. So we're getting it both from the state level help and the federal level as well. And it's us and the farms. And so.
Just to clarify for my identification, I know that Canadians have done that near Pesci Island. They put these like rock walls out in the Lake River there, I guess, to kind of harbor off and prevent the wave action against the shore. That's something similar to what we're talking about. This is not actually fortifying the existing wall. This is to put rock barriers out into the lake, maybe 50 yards out or whatever, to help the break wall, to protect the break wall that we currently have.
But yes, well, it's kind of as well. But part of this would be removing part of that wall to make it more soft shore, because that increases the fish habitat. So it's a several fold, and it wouldn't be for the entire wall. It would only be for a section of it because it's not applicable all the way down. So.
Is there a matching component on that?
There's no matching component on it. This would be all their dollars at this point. So we're getting closer. So we're working on that. It's one of the things we're on. And the other thing it came up briefly. We talked about water meters. As you know, we've talked about water here quite a bit. I'm trying to get rates right and get things going. Well, one of the things that we looked at was how do we make this more efficient for our residents as well as for our staff? The water meter system that we have, which was never completed and never worked functionally, it's never worked 100% since it was put in. So what it does is it reads, we get these electronic reads, which is really great in the wintertime, we get all the reads. But in the summertime, when there's leaves on the trees, which happens to happen every year, we start losing reads. So people that are using water on woodland shores, we may not get those reads, so we can't tell you that you're using a lot of water and help you to fix that. You can't go on and look at it. So what we've done is we've looked at, one of the things we were notified is that our current system was only had a 10-year guarantee on it. It's been 10 years. They are no longer going to service the equipment. So it kind of forced us, we had already been looking since day one that I got here, since they weren't working properly. We decided to take a look at, so we're looking at a couple initiatives to replace now this would not, I don't want to get into all the details tonight because we're getting bids from different style of meters, but all the styles we would not need to get back in the homes. So the meters that you have, except for those that never got one of the original meters, they will work with the current meters that we have. This is the outside reading system. Some of them are internet-based, and we were waiting for a propagation study, which we got today. I don't think, pardon me? Cellular, I'm sorry, thank you. I didn't. Cellular system, and then the other is radio system. So there's two different kind of systems. There's different costs for them, but eventually what we'd like to bring to, we're hoping to have this presentation for the next meeting, is to go ahead and make this change at some point.
I think it's a great idea, but in making the change, I know when I spoke with Mike Way about a year ago, there were 80 meters that were still antiquated, that were not even radio anything.
Correct.
Will those 80 or so be prioritized to get the new ones?
Yeah, they're less, we're down under 50 now.
That's great.
So they've been correcting those. And eventually, yes, we have to have 100%.
I just know those were the hard to do ones. I'd like to see it our priority to do the hard to do ones even first.
Well, one of the
those will get done.
One of the problems that we had, Don, was when they did this, they decided for cost purposes to do this internally. Change all 1,100 and some meters internally. Some of them the staff just wasn't able to do. We've already talked to both the bidding contractors at this point, is we'd have them do all the installs. This project would get done in a couple months instead of 10 years of dragging this out. So that's one of the things that we looked at.
There will be a couple, people have finished their basements tightly around these meters where it's going to take major construction to get to, and sometimes it's just better off to wait for a remodel project or something down the line. But that should only be literally like 5. I know 2 off the top of my head, so I'm sure we'll get a couple more that are extremely difficult to get to. But for the most part, yes, we asked both companies that we've been talking to do the installs so that we can get it done.
It just becomes frustrating for the people that do pay their water bills and have accurate readings to have people in the town that don't have necessarily accurate reading, but just estimated. And that's just, it's inequitable. So,
well, some of them, our tact was that we couldn't get in. We just estimated them so high, they let us in quick. It's good tactic.
Mike, did we ever get something in writing from Southeast Disposal regarding not having to do the phase 3?
No, Steve is still working on that.
Still hoping to get something.
We're going to, but it's politically sensitive.
Oh, okay. Okay, good, thank you.
And that finishes my report.
Okay, new business, we have the Renault paving project contract, pages 46 to 49.
Yeah, so it's just another road on our project list that we would like to get done. We looked at doing minor patches. We were told by a couple different people, you're gonna spend probably 50% of what this cost is for about 10% of the work. Once you get the equipment on site, that's the hardest part, so you might as well just do the whole road. It needs it anyways. So we solicited 3 bids from asphalt companies that we know and have done work in the area. You see those before you. The financial impact will come from the major road fund, and it was planned for in our budgeting process.
Okay, any questions? If not, we need a motion.
So move that we go with the lowest bid.
Any further discussion?
I'll just note that they will be quick. I've already asked them if we approve it tonight. They said they can probably start on the 25th of October. So it'll be a two-day job, but that is a Friday. So I'll probably be on Friday, Monday, giving them a Saturday to make any infrastructure adjustments that might be necessary. So a 2 to 3 day project here at the end of October, get it done in and out.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just a 2-inch mill and fill, so real simple, but you can go ahead and vote.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And the next item,
Mayor, yeah, can we go back to this?
oh, I'm sorry.
That's right, I have a A1.
Yes.
So it was the second one that me and Mike gave you, which was again from the low bidder. This was Hutch Paving. And what we decided, there are some areas that we really need to asphalt fill or crack fill to save us from having more damage through the winter project. As well as there were 4 or 5 streets, A, B, C, and D4, where we had small patches right out in front of City Hall here. There's a big spot of black that needs to be repaired. So it's a little more per square foot, but it's because they're moving equipment around in 4 different
But they're
areas.
still less expensive.
They're still less expensive,
The
correct?
lowest bid. Just going to do it.
Correct.
And we used them before, right?
Yes.
I've used Hutch.
So Hutch Paving also did
I think they did Bellmead.
Bellmead. It's from what they told me that they did Bellmead. So we've used them before. I think they're in the farms doing a lot of work as well. And so that price, the total of the price for all the work, and I provided you with a map showing you where all the work is in all the different areas of where all that work would be done, and that totals $85,900.
Will this come out of our, right, the major street fund or?
Yeah, it'll be both, a little bit of everything. So we've taken, as you know, we took some of that bond money that we had remaining, we'll move that over into whatever fund it needs to go to, major and locals to pay for that. So we have the funds
We'll
for it.
make it work, okay. All those in favor, well, we need a motion to approve this contract with Hutch Paving.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, thank you.
And just for info, Mayor, I think, just so you know, I think total work that's going to be done this year is going to be about almost $900,000 in work by the end of the year. I think, on roads.
So like for capital improvement, capital equipment and capital improvements?
That's strictly all major, local, and road work by the time we're done. Right now, just so you know, they're going to be on Putnam. They already are on Putnam. They did the Edgewoods earlier. They'll be on Stratton, Willow Tree, Clairview, Wilson, Greenbrier, Fontana, and Weber before the end of November.
Okay, wow.
Those were the worst ones. We're going down the list. We won't be able to get them all this year. I mean,
always nice.
And like Mike said, it's not the worst ones that you do, it's the ones that are, you're trying to save from dropping to that next category.
Well, we didn't touch any curbs at all. We put the priority in the roads. I mean, we need a lot of curb work. I mean, John knows, I mean, Lakeshore, there's a lot of curb work that needs to be done, but we're really trying to get the roads done first. Then I guess come back to the curbs. We'll just pray for more federal money getting loose somewhere or state money. And Mike is always looking for grants, and we're already planning for 2028 on Lakeshore. So we're already putting in requests to do Lakeshore on the north end in 2028. So we're working on those things already. So
I know.
that's all I have here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Public comment? We have any public
Oh, no,
comment?
we still have one more thing on the marina.
Oh.
There.
The
1.25 lower.
I
Yeah.
thought, are we doing that or I thought?
We said it was gonna be a 3%.
No, you've already approved the 3%.
2025.
2 years ago.
Yes, you approved it through 25, but the change would be the 125 from 150 to 125.
Oh, for
We need your
Oh,
setbacks.
So
Yes.
for example, if a resident pays 2,000, a non-resident was paying three, now it's gonna go to 2,500.
Is that good enough? You think?
That's still very inexpensive
It's very
compared to what they
inexpensive.
could pay, yes.
It's, the yacht club, their rates are more than the shorts rates as it stands now for.
And we're not the cheapest compared to the other 5 points. We're not the highest, but we're not the lowest. So we're in the middle. Again, I think what the committee decided in Marina, they voted in favor of this, was that having the 9 empty wells cost us more money than the 25% extra that we would make off the other ones. And so they felt like if this will draw some people back, it's kind of what, I mean, it passed. It wasn't unanimous, but I mean, it did pass through there. And Dale worked the numbers and said, yes, if we get to 25% and fill them all, we'll outgain what we would have lost.
But how many do we have to fill before we break even?
Well,
With the change.
It's like 5 if we were five.
Dale left, I'm not sure, but
I think also this coming year, we're gonna rearrange. There's some people that need to go into a bigger well. They're squished and they're sticking out. So there's probably
some big chips.
10 to 15 that are gonna be moving up.
Yeah, we always have people asking for the small wells. We get plenty of those, but not enough.
For the 500 or 600 more, just to move up times, 10, 15 people. Plus, I personally think the 1.5 is a good number for a couple of reasons. Number one, we're a floating dock harbor. Nobody else has that. Number two, we have a gas dock right within our harbor. You don't have to really leave. You could just go over and use the yacht club gas dock. It's open to everybody. But for us, I mean, it's within the harbor. I mean, it's right there. You don't have to go anywhere. Those are two big pluses.
Yeah, I don't think the argument at all was that it's not worth maybe, but it was the fact that people had left. And as Dan said earlier, Dan said he knew people that left just because of the pricing. And Courtney also let us know that she had several people call to rent wells, but when we told them it was 150, bowed out. So that was kind of the two things that kind of drove the discussion.
Okay.
I said it wasn't unanimous, but I think the majority. So obviously.
So the motion is to cure that by cutting in half the non-resident premium. Is that correct?
Well, there hasn't been a motion made yet, but that was the recommendation of Dan Ritter from the Marina Committee. We have to make that motion.
And then this is just for 1 year?
Yes.
Or is this just for 1 year?
Yeah, just to see what happens.
Okay.
Year 2020.
I invite a motion to.
I make a motion that we reduce the non-residents boating or dock fee from 150% of the set fee to 125%.
Is there support?
For the 2025
Yeah.
calendar year.
Is there a second?
Second that.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay.
I oppose.
Okay, 6-1. Public comment? Council comments, John?
Council comment. Number one,
He was-
I'm sorry.
Oh, come on up. He's been waiting here for the whole meeting.
Chris.
I don't know when it's my.
Oh,
It's your turn now,
You're the public.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So my name is Chris Tomowski. I live on 62 Greenbrier. I've lived here since 96. And I have a neighbor in the backyard that refuses to maintain his bushes. They're probably shrubs or bushes. They're probably about 25 feet tall. None of them are cut even. It's like looking at the peaks of the Rocky Mountains. My backyard is probably 20 feet deep. Bushes are 25 feet, so I never know if it's blue sky, gray sky, or raining outside. What I would like to request is some kind of an ordinance, depending on the depth of your backyard, how deep you could have your bushes. I mean, if your backyard is 100 feet deep, 100 foot, 150 feet deep, 25-foot bushes are nothing. If it's 20 feet deep and 25 feet high, I mean, you're like in a jail cell. Not to mention, I'm having a hard time trimming my side because they're so tall.
I'm just passing on pictures. I'm not sure all council had a chance to see.
What
What
you
are you
talking
talking
about?
about?
Left to the right.
Behind.
That's it, John.
I realize there is ordinances like for the front, to the side of the house, but I could not find anything for the back fence.
Well, some years ago, we had an issue about fences. And then the question was, what about fences that grow? Arborvitae.
That's what I'm referring to.
And then we later found out arborvitae would grow to 30 feet tall, 35 feet tall.
Saw the pictures, yes, sir.
Just like I just saw. So I'd have to look at,
Not to mention, I'm sorry, I apologize for cutting you off, but they're in the wires. I mean, they're well beyond
See that.
the
electric lines or?
Have you talked to DTE?
DT has come out and cut the limbs. As a matter of fact, in one of those pictures, you can still see there's like, the gentleman behind me, I'm not gonna complain, he takes care of his yard. I'm not, but what he doesn't see is in the bushes where they cut the trees, there's still like, dead wood sitting there 2 years later that's rotting away. And I'm actually worried I'm gonna start to get rats.
That's what he's.
Oh, right.
And in one of those photographs, there's a fence you can see. So for perspective, you can see the height difference from the 4-foot fence. Now, I like the privacy, so I like the bushes. I just think there should be some ordinance for height.
Yeah, it looks, just looking at the pictures, some of them look really old and.
I've been there since 96. They've been there since 96.
I don't know, Steve, if you have any comments. We had an issue 2011, 2012 though about this. And we had different city attorney at the time, Mark McInerney.
Next door, I know you did.
And it had to do with an ordinance that dealt with trees that basically functioned as a wall, as a fence.
Okay.
And there was an issue at the time, a current issue with municipal law ordinances dealing with regulation of living trees, living bushes. But it was specific about arborvitae. I'd have to take a look at my notes and we have to get that question as a city. What the city can do.
Right. I mean, like I said, at 20 foot tall, it's fine if your backyard is 100 feet deep, because then you still have a good angle, you can still see the sky.
But when you got a narrow.
Yes, sir. When you're 20 feet away and then it's a 25-foot wall. I mean, and like
When we moved in 96, it
Yes.
existed there?
they were there, yes.
It didn't, but not at that height.
No, not at that height, no.
I mean, they're probably 4 or 5 feet.
Right.
Yeah.
And as you saw, I mean, they're not even maintained. Like I said, it's like peaks and valleys. I mean, it's not, if it was even an even cut,
Have you asked your neighbor to do that?
he's not a nice man. To be polite.
I mean, I wouldn't like that, I'm being honest with you. And I used to live in the woods many years ago, and it was always the arborist there. If it's on their property,
Yes, it is.
if it encroaches on your property, you can trim it back to the fence line, but you can't
Yes.
do anything. And I would encourage you first to have a conversation with them and maybe even offer, hey, I would be willing to split the difference with you.
Well,
It's always better to talk to the person first
I have,
directly
and
than going around them.
I have, and it feels like if they were trimmed down some, that it would possibly kill them and then it would be
Yes.
I wasn't gonna argue the point with him, they're his bushes. But he says that it could potentially kill them and it would cost them $12,000 to replace.
Do you know?
I
Mr.
trim my
Marshall?
side.
Do you know Mr. Marshall, Brett Marshall? Have you talked about maybe
I don't know
approaching
what that
him
is.
with
Right.
with Brett. He's on the tree board, he's on he owns Marshall Landscape.
Right.
Yeah,
And he plants all the trees. I mean, I think that would
I
first
can
be
ask him.
to approach, or maybe Brett would.
We deal with this all the time. This is not.
So
Before
why,
we do an ordinance, let's try approaching your neighbor, I think, especially if we have an expert.
Kitty.
Well,
What's your address again?
I'm 62,
62, thank you.
and he's directly behind me on Willison.
62. I'll drive by.
I think his name is Robert, I can't recall the last name.
Well, we won't have it.
Yeah, directly behind 62.
Okay.
2 years ago when DTE came through and trimmed the trees, I tried to get them to cut. They go with their strip cutting. I got another tree in my backyard. I live next door. And all they do is cut a hole in it. Once they get their clearance, they don't care.
And what,
I couldn't get them to change the rules.
right, and when they were there, as Bob says, what they dropped is still there on the ground.
Yeah, they leave it there, they don't care.
Yeah. And it's sitting there rotting right now.
Well, sir, I'm glad you brought it to our attention. We're gonna follow up on it and see what we can do.
I appreciate that, thank you.
So,
And if Marshall, my apologies, nursery, whatever, if that gets us nowhere, is there any possibility of an ordinance being created?
we already have an ordinance dealing with walls and fences, and I'm gonna need to take a look at it myself. And see, because the issue at the time, and it was kind of a current issue with Michigan municipal law was, can you regulate? How much regulation can you do? Because there's walls and fences that stay 4 feet because they're made out of wood or building material. And there's fences that start at 4 feet and then they go to 30 feet.
Right.
Those are the arborvitae. And the question is whether or not you can regulate. And I think there's some room, because we have an existing ordinance on this. I'm almost positive. But I need to
That's for a front yard, yes, because I've tried looking at it. There is for the front yard, but for the
Well, I
side,
think
the
that
side,
for
but not
side
the
lots,
back.
I'll need to take a look at it. And, because this came up about a dozen years ago.
Right.
Somebody was concerned that arborvitae's are real pretty, buying a Costco when they're
Beautiful, right.
5 feet, and they grow fairly fast, a foot a year.
Right.
And the next thing you know, they're 20 feet, 25 feet. And now you got something that it's taken over your enjoyment of the property.
Exactly.
And unlike some states like New York they actually have easements for light. You can't block out somebody's access to light. Natural skylight, there are some very, very tough restrictions in other cities and other states.
Well, if an ordinance was to be created and if it was graduated, depending on the depth of your yard, then one could still have them at 20 feet if his backyard is 100 feet deep.
The problem then, it looks like it's ambiguous. Or it looks like it was, what was the demarcation line? If it's a 20-foot lot, then we got to regulate. If it's a 45-foot lot, then we can't because you're getting increased enjoyment. It'd be very difficult legally to put something together that I think could pass court review. Because you'd say, well, how'd you determine it? Well, we picked that number out of the air. I got a 100-foot lot. So anything within 50 feet to me was affecting my enjoyment of the property. And therefore, I object. But there's got to be some reasonable basis for the restrictions. And let me take a look at it.
Okay.
I'm going to buy the property to see it, because if you don't mind.
Please, anytime. Thank you for your time.
Well, thanks for coming. Council comments, John?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you know, the Boo Fest is tomorrow. It's always an exceptional event. And I highly recommend that if your neighbors come and any age is welcome, because there's always something to do for little kids to seniors there. It's a great event. It's good for the community and for camaraderie. So I'll be there. And hope to see everybody there.
Thank you, John. John, you got any comments?
Nothing this month, thank you.
Okay. Danielle?
I would like to thank everybody for a relatively brief meeting this evening. And I have really just one comment on November 11th. We are blessed to be able to vote in this country. We have free and open elections, so I encourage everybody to vote then. And if not, we have the opportunity to vote early, which I've already done. On a personal note, I would strongly recommend that our residents and or council consider voting yes for the sinking fund for Grosse Pointe Public Schools. I think people move to the Grosse Pointes, all the Grosse Pointes, for three primary reasons. Number one is for the safety, the services, and the school district in the school. And finally, it's no secret that I am against the Helm millage. And I would encourage you to look at the language of that. That 3% is only this year, and as your home values increase, that millage will go up every year for the taxpayers. Again, people move to Grosse Pointe for the services. Yes, it's a beautiful community, the police, I don't think they move here for the Helm. And there are many senior services available at your fingertips.
Thank you, Danielle. Bob?
Last month I wasn't here, I was visiting DC. Just a pleasure to live in a place where you don't have traffic.
Bumper to bumper.
Just crazy place to live. But I wouldn't want to live there, so I'm glad that you're going to be here.
Thanks, Bob. Don?
I just want to say, echo what Councilwoman Geller said about the election, but it is November 5th. I think you should let me just make sure that's correct. It's November 5th, so don't come on November 11th. It's too late.
I think it was like 11:05 and yes.
Better mistake.
Thank you.
And also, I do want to mention, I was one of the people that voted in affirmation of having the senior millage go on the ballot. I just want that to be misconstrued in any way that I'm an advocate of passing the senior village, because I'm not. But I think it should be the voter's choice, and that's why, like as stated during that particular meeting, Dr. Dacknack and Dr. Segal both said the same thing. And again, I'm an advocate of it being voted on, but not an advocate of passing it.
Dr. Segal, I have a Juris Doctor, and my wife, the doctor, reminds me I'm not a doctor. Thank you, though.
Mr.
Appreciate it.
I corrected that you corrected Mr.
Sandra, you got any comments?
The only comment is I have the same opinion as Don and Danielle. I was not here for the vote. I was absent, but I would have voted no. I believe that it's a great cause, but there's other things that we do that replace that. And when we do hopefully have the community center, we will have some events there and activities for seniors. And I believe also that it's a nonprofit. They should do fundraising to come up with their funds. So in my opinion, we need to take care of our city and what benefits our city. And basically that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Sandra. There's a couple comments I have. Well, number one, we lost Vito Cosenza about a week ago, and Vito was just a real, when I moved into Grosse Pointe Shores in 1996, I met him through our local church, and what a wonderful man he was. And he got involved with our elections. He was on the election commission. He lived to the ripe old age of 94, but was really a remarkable person. He was a chemist by training, worked in Ford in the paint department. Then he went to law school at night at Detroit College of Law, became a lawyer. Then he became a broker. I mean, he just really a neat guy. And he was very involved with the Knights of Columbus, I know. Second, we're going to have some openings on some of the commissions. And so we seek out the volunteers. And Ted Katulish was here. I tell him we're looking for a better way to reward or to recognize our volunteers. And I see Chuck Dreifrock in the back here. He's one of the volunteers sitting on the pension commission. And we just met last week to talk about different things with our pension, the defined benefit pension funding and whatnot. So And then last but not least, we talked about the helm, and I voted against putting it on the ballot because I was concerned, first off, it impacts per capita at Grosse Pointe Shores the most by far. And it raises initially $127,000 from the Shores taxpayers. Now that'll go up every year because of the cost of living, the cost of basically inflation in the metropolitan area. And it's a 6-year tax, but it's not a 6-year tax. It'll end up being a permanent tax. I read in the paper that they're seeking to have endowment status, and in order to generate the $1 million, $1.2 million that the village election will raise, they would need to have it funded with $12 to $15 million to have an endowment at really current internal rates of return to replenish what their operating budget would be. And for many years, I've been involved with mayors delivering Meals on Wheels. I've never had anybody in Grosse Pointe Shores, ever. They asked me, do I mind if I go to Harper Woods? I said, sure, I'll go to Harper Woods. And they gave me 3 or 4 lunches to take to Harper Woods residents. But when you look at the statistics, one of the essential services that the home provides is they had 25,919 Meals on Wheels to the 5 Grosse Pointes and Harper Woods, from 6 cities. So I looked at how many came from the shores. 5. And they had here tax help. 5 people sought tax help at the helm. And medical escort rides, 7. I look at Medicare, Medicaid assistance program, 7. Navigation, information, assistance, 20. And that's why I voted to keep it from because it impacts us per capita the most, but yet it's so underutilized that it just doesn't seem fair. And quite honestly, I'm worried about the future. In a few years, we may need to raise the millage. And that $127,000 that needs to be cost adjusted for the subsequent years could be used to help pay for infrastructure for Grosse Pointe Shores, could help pay for roads and any repairs to the marina. And that's why I didn't want it on the ballot. And again, it's a great charity. I give to them. I've donated to them. They're doing wonderful things, but I just think that this is the wrong approach. And so I know we've had comments about this, but again, like I said, the utilization rate is so low and the per capita cost is so high that it just seems not to be, and the concerns about the future, about that $127,000 should stay in our coffers in Grosse Pointe Shores. So our next council meeting is after the election. It's November 19th. I'm looking at the clock. You have 3 hours and 5 minutes to file your timely tax return electronically. So today, it's Eastern Daylight Time here. So I'm headed back to work in fact. So I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Thank you.